One thing that always rubbed me the wrong way about Eiyuden Chronicle's ending was how rushed and incomplete it felt. If you remember near the end of the game, just before the battle to recapture Altisvice, a number of battles took place off-screen to recapture all of the Lost League territory. And alongside those battles, a very important event also took place off-screen and was glossed over with a couple of lines of dialogue. That event was Seign leading his group on a covert mission to rescue the young Galdian Emperor from the control of Dukes Aldrich. A significant event that turned the tide of the war and shifted momentum in the favour of the League and allowed them to defeat the Dukes. And as I initially feared after playing the base game, the Seign Story Chapter covers that exact event, which makes it feel like something that was purposefully cut from the main game with the intention of being sold later as a DLC. You already know how the story of Seign's chapter ends, you've played the base game and it's explained there, so I won't talk much about the specifics of it. What I did find odd though is that Ivy, despite being a member of Seign's group, was not involved in the story and didn't even make an appearance. That was quite disappointing as she was my favourite member of Seign's group. The Seign chapter does however introduce a new playable character, Grace, who was the former lover of Seign's brother Arthur, who left the Imperial Army after Arthur's death and joined the Resistance. I'm not sure how I feel about Grace as a character. There are moments where I thought she was a well-written character when she was discussing her past with Seign's brother, and then there are times where I was rolling my eyes in annoyance with the typical Marvel-esque writing that plagues modern media. You know, the type of writing where a serious moment can't just be a serious moment, or a serious event can't just be a serious event. They have to throw in some ill-timed, light-hearted or cringe humour to ease the mood, and all it accomplishes is hurting your immersion. Here you are on a risky, covert operation behind enemy lines. You're deep in enemy territory, all alone with no backup, to rescue a child from a sizable force loyal to Dukes Aldrich. Your very lives are on the line, and there's a high risk of failure, and as you're stealthily avoiding detection and enemy patrols, you have time to continuously stop and crack a few jokes. This is a problem that I felt Eiyuden in general suffered from, and Seign's chapter is no different. It's a far cry from the more mature writing of Suikoden. I'm not saying that humour has no place, it absolutely does. The Suikoden games had plenty of fun moments, and Eiyuden itself had some fun moments too. But you need to time them and place them correctly and not insert them into serious moments. When things like this happen, it feels like the writer isn't taking the moment seriously, and if the writer isn't taking the moment seriously, why should I? It hurts my immersion. Anyway, back to Grace. Grace does officially join you after you complete the DLC, and she becomes a playable character in the main game. She's also usable from the beginning of the game in New Game Plus as well. Unfortunately, she's a complete afterthought and she's lazily implemented. Unlike every other character, she appears to have no dialogue during New Game Plus. At least in the few hours I spent speeding through up to the fall of Altisvice, she didn't have a single line of dialogue. She has no hero combos, she's not usable in guild missions, she's not usable in the theatre, she's not a playable opponent in the card game, and I spent nearly 15 minutes running back and forth searching the headquarters and I couldn't find her anywhere. She does however have some backstory through Bababa's divinations, and it reveals that her favourite food is fruitcake. So I thought perhaps she can appear in the cook-offs. Then I spent nearly 30 minutes starting cook-offs and reloading the game to try and get her to appear as a judge, and I never once saw her appear as a judge. Maybe that's just bad luck on my part, as there are quite a lot of characters in the judging pool, so I can't say definitively either way whether or not she'll appear in the cook-offs. In terms of combat, she's alright. If you like the Howling Vice Guild characters in Suikoden, you'll probably take a shine to her, but she's certainly treated more as a little addition to the roster rather than as a full-fledged character. Now, I've talked about the story, the writing, and the characters, but what about the length? A big complaint that I had about the Marisa chapter was its length. The developers revealed during an Ask Me Anything on Reddit before the game released that the DLC chapters would take between 2 to 3 hours each to complete. That wasn't true for the Marisa chapter, and most people completed it within an hour. And just like with the Marisa chapter, the Seign chapter also clocks in at roughly 1 hour in length, which is significantly shorter than the 2 to 3 hours which was promised by the developers. The Seign chapter also shares another problem that the Marisa chapter had, in that it carries over all of your levels and equipment, making everything far too easy and providing no challenge whatsoever. This might have been fine if it was someone's first playthrough of the game, but even on a first playthrough, you have access to the hero mode and endless mode trials, which can easily level your characters up to the max level. The game has also been out for a year. Many people have played on New Game Plus. Most of our characters are maxed out and have the best equipment. The developers cannot and should not assume that everybody is at the same level. These story chapter expansions should have had your characters entering with predetermined levels and equipment to create a fun and challenging experience. Although even Grace, who started at level 54, had absolutely no issues killing enemies, and she very rarely took any damage from them, including from the boss. The developers clearly didn't put much effort into balancing the chapter, which is very frustrating. For lore enthusiasts, there's a really cool moment in the chapter where you get to visit a museum in the Gallian capital. And while you're there, you can interact with the displays and you get lots of little one-line descriptions of backstory and lore of significant historical events of the Gallian Empire. The inclusion of all these historical and world-building blurbs of lore felt like classic Murayama, and reading through them was the most fun I had throughout the entirety of Seign's chapter. Overall, I do think the Seign chapter is of much higher quality than the Marisa chapter, but that's not saying much, as the Marisa chapter was lackluster and underwhelming at the best of times. I know I've been largely critical, but if you think I'm being a hater, or if you think I'm being harsh just to hate on the game, I'm not. I have over 350 hours in 100 Heroes as of the time of this video. I love the game, but just because I love the game, just because we love the game, that doesn't mean that we can't criticize the game's faults and shortcomings. And so far, we're 2 for 2 with these DLC chapters not only being completely disappointing and underwhelming in terms of the quality and quantity of the content delivered for the price they're asking, but also in feeling like they should have been part of the base game. Now, I'm not saying that they were cut from the base game to be sold as DLC, but they absolutely do feel that way. Marisa's story in the base game was lacking, and it felt like something was missing. And a major event in Seign's story in the base game was completely skipped over and happened off screen, leading to a rushed and unsatisfying ending to the game. So one does have to wonder, and at least ask the question, were Marisa and Seign's story events cut and held back from the base game with the intention of being used as DLC later to fulfill backer goals and promises? $7.99 is just too steep of a price to be asking for what little content they provide, and also for the lack of quality of the content provided. Luckily, I got Seign's chapter for free for being a backer of the game, but if I had spent $7.99 or $24.99 for the season pass, and this is what I was given, I would legitimately feel ripped off. There simply isn't enough content or quality in this DLC to be worth the price they're asking. The inclusion of Grace as a character outside of the DLC does add some value to it, but unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, she does feel like a complete afterthought in how poorly and lazily she's implemented outside of the DLC itself. I simply can't recommend paying $7.99 for this to anyone. This is unfortunately another DLC that you're best waiting for a steep sale to pick up. Some people may say that we should lower our expectations for these story expansions, that we're expecting too much out of the DLC after experiencing the game and witnessing its shortcomings. But I don't think we should lower our expectations. By lowering our expectations, we're lowering our standards for what is an acceptable level of enjoyment, and we're lowering the bar of acceptable quality and effort. We've seen their past works, we know they're capable of delivering vastly superior quality than what these 2 DLC chapters have provided, and that's what we want. We want the quality that we know they're capable of. Anyway, that's it for this one. Have you played the Seign chapter yet? What did you think of it? Do you plan on playing it, or are you caught up in the release of the Suikoden 1 and 2 HD remaster? Let me know your thoughts below. Also, I'm working on my thoughts and impressions video for the Suikoden HD remaster, and I'll have that up soon. And I'm also working on a thorough deep dive into Starleap as well. Plus, I've still got the Island Nations lore video to edit. It's going to be a busy week. Anyway, thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.